Hello and welcome to the M.O.C Spotlight, where we take apart what you build. This is your host, Ven, and for today's episode we will be looking at Baruka, or Baruka, I don't know how it's pronounced. Baruka, Native Son, created by Chro and posted on our message boards. And as always, my method of reviewing will involve a point system that is based on 3 fundamental attributes: the overall appearance of the M.O.C, the build of the M.O.C itself, and the concepts and ideas behind the M.O.C's creation. Each quality will amount up to 5 points that will build up into a final score that will be determined at the end of the episode. Alright, now the first thing I noticed about this M.O.C is that it is very red. The next thing I noticed is that there's spikes everywhere, but what really caught my eye was the mask that is used on this M.O.C. As you can see, this is actually a custom painted mask with rubber bands on it. Now, Chro did not actually make this mask himself. It is actually the work of someone else on DeviantArt, but the neat thing about this is how well it meshes with the rest of the M.O.C, not only in colors, but also in the overall appearance. So, mask aside, the rest of this M.O.C looks really cool, pretty streamlined in design, and it has a consistently complex appearance throughout. Also, the colors are spread out quite nicely. The dark red appears to be the primary color over every body part, with black lying just beneath it. An interesting feature of this M.O.C is that it has a bunch of spikes all over it, and not like how butter spreads over bread, but it's an aesthetic feature that can be seen throughout the entire M.O.C. You have spikes on his shoulders, his knees, his lower legs, his midsection. It kind of gives this M.O.C a little bit of character, a sort of like menacing look to it, complemented by the savage looking claws he's sporting, which also look pretty cool. I feel as though without these small features, and of course the inclusion of that distinct mask, this M.O.C would appear a little basic, in that it probably wouldn't be as characterized. But I mean, take all that away, it's still a good looking M.O.C. Don't get me wrong, it's really solid. I really like how those legs look. They sport quite a good bit of detail. And the upper body looks structurally sound as well. Pretty much the same pros as the legs, except I can't help but pay more attention to dem legs. And now one last thing I'd like to note about this M.O.C's appearance is this little feature on the chest, right here. I like this part a lot, for some reason. Overall, I'm quite impressed with this M.O.C's appearance, and I can't really make any complaints. Now let's look at the build. Now it's fairly easy to see that this M.O.C's build is very complex. But it's the complexity of this M.O.C's construction that makes it look so solidified. Now just look at the way the legs have been constructed. There is a lot of small parts being put together here in just the legs. I personally really dig M.O.Cs with these kind of builds. It's kind of like my style of creating M.O.Cs. Fitting a bunch of smaller Technic parts together to construct a big, solid build. Even the back of the feet have a little bit of bulk to them. And speaking of bulk, let's look at that torso. I personally really enjoy the way this torso was built. It basically just screams solid. And I've been using that term a lot this episode, because that is honestly the best term I can use when describing the structure of this M.O.C. It's very solid. Well, aside from one little thing, but I'll get back to that in a second. It has nothing to do with the torso. So back to the torso, back of the torso, we can see here just the complexity that went into building it. Not as attractive looking as the front, but you really start to appreciate just how much went into just making the torso. One really cool feature about this torso is that the waist is actually articulated. And I actually didn't see this coming. It's like if you expected a boulder to just split in half randomly. No, that just doesn't happen. Probably the least complex portions of this M.O.C's body are the arms. This isn't really a complaint, but it is worth noting, since they are fairly complex in their own way. There's also quite a bit of small parts that went into the creation of these arms. Now, what I really like here are the use of the rubber bands that seem to keep those Enika shoulder plates in place, and I also like the build of the forearms. how it meshes into the claws. Now I want to go back to that one thing that I stated earlier that didn't look so solid, and that would be the neck area. Chro used a fairly interesting method of getting that mata head to attach to the body and maintain some articulation. Now this is a really interesting way of doing this, and you know, props to Chro for making that work and all. But as I stated earlier, it seems like it's the most flimsy portion of this mock. The one thing on this mock that'll most likely pop off, or slip off, or crumble, or disintegrate or something. But it does seem to do the job of adding articulation to the head. But, I don't know. I'm a little mixed on this. And with all that said, let's move on to the concepts. So when Chro posted this to the message boards, he also included a bit of a backstory. This backstory is fairly short, so I'm just gonna go ahead and read it. This Toa of Fire hails from a primitive and peaceful tribe of Matoran living in the wilderness. His bone-adorned armor and fang-fingered gauntlets may appear sinister, but Baruka is actually a naive and valiant warrior with a pure heart. I'll say one thing that he surely got on point was the sinister appearance of this mock, because if I wasn't told that it was a Toa of Fire, I would have assumed that it's supposed to be some sort of villain. And I'm guessing all the spikes on his body are supposed to represent the bones from the backstory, because nothing else really indicates that, so I'm just gonna assume that these are the bones. And I like the idea that his claws are fang-fingered gauntlets, quote-unquote. Seems like a legitimate explanation for that design choice. And so anyway, the big idea behind this mock is that it's supposed to be a primitive-looking Toa of Fire, and I think that works. However, the only indication that this is a Toa of Fire is the primary color being dark red. And you'd think that it'd be obvious that a red-colored character would associate with fire, but I actually mistaken this for like an evil villain, probably a master of shadows or whatnot. I don't know, maybe if he had like flaming gauntlets or maybe a bit of orange or something to support that this character can control fire. I think all the other ideas for this mock were executed very well. I can definitely see the primitive look to it, and I think it's pretty cool that it doesn't even have to look like a Neanderthal to look primitive. And now I think I'm done elaborating on all this, so let's go ahead and determine the scores. In terms of appearance, Baruka achieves a 4.5 out of 5. It's a fairly basic looking mock, but the mask, the details, and the overall intricate design really give it the edge, and I'm fairly impressed with it. When it comes to the build, this mock receives another 4.5 out of 5. It is really well constructed, and the articulation is beastly. But what good is a Toa of Fire if his head pops off every now and then? Again, I'm not sure if it actually does, it just kinda looks like it could. And again, I really don't know how to feel about that construction of the neck. And for concepts, this mock receives a 4 out of 5. It's a really interesting and sinister looking Toa of Fire, but it doesn't really look all that convincing as a Toa of Fire. However, as I stated earlier, all the other ideas that Chro had were executed fairly well. So that's pretty much that. And now for the final score, I dictate a 13 out of 15. This is a really good looking Bionicle mock, and it goes to show the wonders that you can pull off with just small Technic parts, and even spike pieces and whatnot. And that mask just looks spectacular on this mock. Good job, Chro. I hope to see more out of you. And thank you all for watching. Be sure to rate, comment, subscribe. If you want a higher possibility of me finding and reviewing your mock, post it on our message boards. And I'll see you all next time.